Well, thanks for joining, you guys. So I will say for CUSP, recreation is not our primary focus at all. Um, I'll show my first screen here in a second, but we do recreation in terms of maybe a scale of a larger project, or at times we have certain agreements to maintain some trails and things. So I spent 35 years with Colorado State Parks. Now it's Parks and Wildlife. So in that context, I've opened two parks from scratch, and I've closed down one park and have a variety of recreation experiences across the spectrum. So I'm glad we can try to do this. Let me cover about 4 or 5 projects we're working on now. Let me see if I can do the share screen thing and then go here and then do. Yes, I know I'm scaring green. Slideshow from beginning. All right. You guys see that?
Yeah, it looks good.
Cool. So this is who we are. And so basically CUSP, the Coalition for the Upper South Platte, works in the Upper South Platte watershed, all the way from Alma, where some of the high peaks are, all the way out to the east to Strontia Springs Reservoir, and then from areas on the border of Clear Creek County down to and parts of Park County. We focus in Park, Teller, Jefferson, and Douglas counties mostly. And then our big thing is somebody had mentioned collaboration, and honestly, that's what we're about. Collaboration to make projects happen. So our mission is right there. It is about community values and economic sustainability and stakeholders. And then we focus on a big focus is on forest health and fuels reduction. Right now, we're doing some CWPP updates for Teller County, wildfire outreach and education, post-fire restoration. Luckily, I haven't had a big fire where we had to go in and restore things since I've been on. I've been executive director for a little over 4 years. But they have in the past done some big projects on the Hayman fire and the Waldo Canyon fire. We are working on river and stream restoration, and then we do recreation impacts almost as a side thought sometimes. So one of the first things that we're doing, this is 11 Mile Canyon. This is the mouth of 11 Mile Canyon. And this diversion dam had been in place since 1952. It was built by Colorado Springs Utilities on Forest Service land. We worked with, I think I have 10 different funders and many different stakeholders and partners in this project to remove this dam, and it is now gone. We finished that last fall, and then restore that stream. Behind that diversion dam, we dug out 19,000 cubic yards of sediment and exposed some huge boulders and improved the habitat. The recreation aspect is going to happen this year in 24. So one of the things is this little social trail that went through the willows to reach the diversion dam and move upstream so people could fish and stuff. So we are, and this isn't finished yet. I actually have a Fishing is Fun grant for this. So this spring, this will become an ADA trail with crusher fines and stuff. And it's wider now and it's flatter now. And it is actually the access they had to build to reach the diversion dam with their heavy equipment this fall. It's a pretty cool project from start to finish, including early design and then final design and then paying contractors and everything through the end will be a little over $5 million. So the trail part then is Fishing is Fun. We actually had to deal with right above this is the 11 Mile Canyon Road, and the study in 2015 showed massive amounts of sediment coming off that road, crossing this trail and into the river. Not to mention just the natural sediment that comes down the river that was being held back by the diversion dam. So we did have to build in this some crossings, water crossings, where we could shift the water, make it go. So there's a couple of concrete box culverts that will be under this trail. And then this spring, everything that we dug out, we're repurposing. So we'll use a lot of that material, compact it as the trail, and then put crusher fines on it. So, and the primary recreation aspect on this is going to be fishing access. As it makes the corner, if you look downstream here on this upper photo, makes a corner there, it goes into private land and into Lake George itself, the lake, not the town. So this concrete structure down here was an old fishing platform that was built years ago. We tore that out and restored it. And this isn't finished yet because we were working in, I think December 6th was the last day we worked in 2023 on this project. So, and CUSP is primarily, this is on Forest Service land. So we're primarily the fiscal host, but we're part of the design team for the whole thing. So we built this natural bench out of boulders, and it will be topped with crusher fines, and the ADA trail will come into this. So folks, handicapped folks will be able to access for fishing opportunities. A lot of our focus is on amenities. So this old vault toilet got destroyed, pretty much gone. And then during the time the grants were written and the time we actually ordered the toilet, of course, the cost had doubled on this, but this will also move way up closer to the parking lot, so it's accessible to people. Right now, you got to walk about 100 yards to get to it. So a lot of this material, when it was destroyed, then, you know, was dug out and just hauled off. It was everything that was not natural was hauled off: concrete, rebar, and it's the same with the dam. So on that particular project, that's all Forest Service. So we have an agreement with South Park Ranger District, multiple agreements actually, and we're using CALR or Collaborative Aquatic Landscape Restoration money, which was part of the big funding push about a year and a half ago through Congress and stuff. We also have some WIP money, which is Watershed Health Improvement. So the Forest Service for the project, for the total of the 5 million, contributed about 2 million, a little over 2 million. The rest I went out and raised through non-federal partners. Some cases there were other federal agencies that threw in. Colorado Water Conservation Board, Colorado Springs Utility threw in a bunch of money because they actually owned the structure that we took out. So it was a juggling act with 9 different funders to always pair them together when you're trying to do reports and match money. But a lot of it was under agreements with the Forest Service. And I think 4 or 5 different signed agreements with them that specify just that project alone. The other thing we're doing with the Forest Service, this is just outside of Lake George along County Road 112. The river outside of Lake George makes this bend and goes up this county road. And this is called the Happy Meadows Corridor. So in relation to this was extremely busy on weekends, holidays, during the summer period. This is a county road where then everybody would park up and down the road, both sides. So it was very congested, or they would find an open area and drive across riparian meadows and wet meadows to get to the river. So there was a lot of just natural destruction happening by people doing that. So we got a forest, again, with Forest Service money, but also with Park County has their own land and water trust fund. So this is located in Park County, and it's a 1 cent tax they put on folks, and they renew it every so often and stuff. So they have a granting program. So we worked with the Forest Service, this is a several $100,000 project too. Got a grant to restore this road. And actually what we did is we went in, and here's some of the activities that actually handled it. It's a big fishing area. There's a trail at the very end, the South Trail, River Trail. There's a small campground there, and then it's big for people that were tubing. And a lot of the tubers would tend to cross private land to put in just happened to be, it was an easy access area. So again, under contract, we hired a contractor to put in, it's almost a mile plus of posting cable that blocked off all those meadows that people were driving across. But realizing, of course, that if we block it off, they're just going to park anywhere. So then we went and built with Forest Service engineers, designed this, and then their heavy equipment operator built one, and then we hired a contractor to build the other 3. We built 4 parking lots, fairly large gravel parking lots for people to park and get them off the county road. And then the Forest Service goes in and adds whatever signage they're going to do. And then a lot of the areas that were damaged, we went in and tried to reclaim. We'll see if that project just finished this fall. So we'll see if we were successful there, and see if people will take to what actually happened. Because whenever you put something up, and a lot of you that may deal with recreation, you know, somebody's going to try to tear it down. So the other big thing is people were going to the restroom in the willows. So you could walk through the willows and you could see little white flowers just about everywhere, with the intense use that it gets. So we put in 3 restrooms at different locations. This one wasn't quite finished when I took this picture, but this will be a handicap accessible restroom. And so they'll be up to Forest Service then. We build it, Forest Service maintains it. So these are actually, if you deal with the CXT company out of Texas, prefabbed, and they bring them up on trailers, and then you need a big crane, which was challenging because this road is pretty narrow and it's windy. So to get a big crane up there to lift these into place was somewhat of a challenge, but it got done. So. And a lot of this goes to not only creating the recreation amenity or putting in place the recreation amenity, it goes to improving watershed health. And with watershed health and keeping people focused into restrooms or drive or parking in appropriate areas, then it also in the long run helps water quality.
What was the price tag on one of those?
Good question, because the price doubled on the restrooms from the time the grants were written until we had to do it. So we had to scramble to find more money. These are, I'm going to say 80 some thousand.
Okay. Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there specific grant funding that you used to buy those restroom structures?
Yeah, we used, these were bought with Park County Land and Water Trust funds, and we matched it with some whatever funds the Forest Service could come up with. We put a little bit of Forest Service WIP money into this, the watershed health improvement, so that helped pay for some of the improvements also. Several years ago, we looked at, and unfortunately it was during COVID, and it was for another area outside of Buffalo Creek. There's a whole corridor we were working in, and we were looking at trying to get money for restrooms, and we approached a lot of the different health departments, but they were so focused on COVID, they're like, we don't have time to even talk about some of that. So if you're moving ahead into the future, you may just check with local health departments and CDPHE to see if they have funding available for these kind of things. And that corridor I was just talking is called the 550 corridor. It's Buffalo Creek Recreation Area. It's between Deckers and Bailey. It's a back road where there's a lot of primitive campsites. So the Forest Service actually hired us to go in, and we installed right around 70 fire rings at different areas where people camp. And then we cleaned up the old rock fire rings and dispersed the rocks and cleaned up the ashes and stuff. So this was funded actually by a Great Outdoors Colorado grant at the time. I'm trying to think what the name of that grant was. It was a couple of years ago. And it was one of their grants they were putting out during the COVID time. But it was primarily my crews, and then we had volunteers from Lincoln Cares in Denver. So we had some youth out, underprivileged youth that would help us install those. But the guy in the blue shirt here is the one that ran the project for us. And we have to install those to certain specs. So it's more than just putting them in the ground. It's, you got to drill these holes, fill the holes with concrete, and then the thing's got to be level. So it's whatever the Forest Service specs are. So the GOCO money paid for my crew's time plus some of the fire rings, and then the Forest Service picked up the cost on the rest of the fire rings and all the concrete that was involved. And again, this gets down to, this is a heavily mountain biking area, so it gets down to improving things that aren't going to wash away into the local streams and stuff. So watershed health mostly, and it gives them something to say, hey, listen, here's a rule. You got to build a fire in a fire ring, and hopefully it helps them a little bit with fire protection. We also do some work on a private campground. It's just outside of, it's outside of Florissant, Colorado. So it's called Sanborn Western Camps. And every year they have youth come up and so we use those youth as volunteers. So they have an entire trail system. And over the years, their trail system's been in pretty poor shape. Lots of cupping. It goes through meadows. So lots of cupping. There's really no slope to these for water drainage. So the youth help us to maintain those trails by going in. And this was one of our special projects director at the time. She's no longer with us, was leading this project. But, you know, they put in some structures to try to shed water, but there's not a whole lot of cross slope on these to have water sheet across and stuff. And the camp doesn't necessarily want to reroute them. So you just do what you can. So go in, fill them, pack them down, and do whatever improvements we can on them. And then one of the main areas from where the campers stay down to some of the camping facilities is a fairly steep slope that was eroding away, and it was fairly dangerous to walk on. It was pretty hard to get footing because it's all decomposed granite. So we went in and used their crews and their volunteers to put in steps to kind of make it safer for them. And then those are lined with rock to kind of help control some of the water situations and stuff. That's one of the few situations I'll say you can line a trail with rock. Normally I say we don't do it. So. One of the bigger trail projects that we have going on is actually on Denver Waterland. So this is Cheeseman Reservoir, and it's owned by Denver Water, and it's water supply for Denver area. Severely impacted by the Hayman fire in 2002. And this is not an old picture, so it still looks like this in a lot of cases. So the South Platte River runs into it. In fact, it's the stretch that runs from 11-mile reservoir through 11-mile canyon, comes out, goes through different areas, Wildcat Canyon and such, and winds up down in Cheeseman Reservoir before there's an outlet. So very erosive soils, and then add on top of that the impact of fire. So one of the issues we have is it's heavily used by fishermen, and it's about a 2-mile hike from the parking lot down, up and over these ridges, down again into the river and stuff, where it goes into the canyon, so, or into the reservoir. So a lot of these guys hike this in waders and things. So very erosive soils here. So there have been a couple of storms that just wipe out whatever trails they have. And then again, you add into the fire damage on that, and you have a situation which is not very sustainable at all. And all those years, and CUSP has an agreement with Denver Water. So every year, you know, they provide a little bit of funding. We send a crew out, try to get a volunteer group together, and went out and worked on it. And then with my trails background, I came in and go, what you're doing isn't working on this, really. So we did something a little different, went out and raised some funding to actually hire a contractor that I worked with in the past, who are near Maysville, which is near Salida, Arrowhead Trails. And they use a Mini X to do a lot of the work. And on this situation, the worst part of this trail was these very steep switchbacks right out of the parking area or out of the trailhead, and they were always washing out. And then the material would wash over the trails, down the switchback legs below them, and into the parking area or onto the main road. So they came in and they spent a couple of weeks working this for us with their mini X's, and it was a combination of mini excavator and then hand crews too. On these trails, the tread was in terrible shape. The drainage wasn't working. It wasn't sheeting. Back slopes were in terrible shape, and the critical edge or the outslope on the outside part of the trail was washing away. So every year it would just keep making the trail more narrow, more narrow, more narrow. So with the Mini X, they went out and just rebuilt these trails to where they're a sustainable level. Now, in this type of soil and with the kind of fire damage that's all around there, there's no guarantees it's all going to hold, just because last year we did this one in 2021 is when we had them out working. No, 2022. 2023, at the end of June, there was a thunderstorm that dropped like 1 to 2 inches of rain in an hour. And so there was damage, but not as bad as it could have been. But they actually came back and guaranteed their work and went and fixed it for us. So now above this, it gets a little flatter and then kind of winds up and down a bunch of ridges and stuff. So I will take, when we get our summer crews hired, I will take them in and finish that work this year. And it's a little funky because some of it's owned by Denver Water, which I have an agreement with, and the rest is owned. Then there's a middle section actually that's owned by the Forest Service, who I don't have an agreement with for maintenance. And then the end, as it drops down to the river again, is owned by Denver Water. So I'm trying to talk to both of them and get them to talk to each other and go, listen, should we take care of the whole thing, or you just want us to do the Denver Water section and leave the Forest Service section alone, or what? So the final product kind of looks like this when it was done. So what we wound up doing was, I want to say there were 6 legs to the switchbacks, and they were all pretty short. So we actually closed a bunch of legs of the switchbacks, and then we extended them. So when you're trying to gain elevation, you can either do that by length, or you can do it by structures and stairs. Well, most of it's too steep for structures, so we gain length by extending some legs of the switchback, and then we close the old ones. And they're natural closures. It's not like we have closed signs on them or anything. They just dragged some old fallen timbers and different things to try to replant some of those and then try to close those. So with that, we have participating agreements with the Forest Service. So the WIP agreement, the Watershed Health Improvements, usually good for a couple of years, but if we add projects that's not identified in that agreement, then we just do a modification. And usually the Forest Service pushes things through pretty quick. So if they come up with a project, or if we come up with a project, we just modify the agreement. It's been pretty easy. And it's the same thing, you know, that first picture I showed, that first project in the dam, that I have like 4 different agreements with them, but as we move along and other things come up, we just modify it. And we've had some of these projects, we've had, especially the first one, we've had people out from their DC office and their regional office to look at these. Not too long ago, we had an audit by the Office of Inspector General. Everything went great. So a lot of it is keeping good books, and then a lot of it gets down to the design. So sometimes I hope nobody's an engineer, but I'm afraid to let engineers get, because they'll either over design things and stuff, as opposed to a trails person. The trails person will know exactly what the land's going to do and what they're after. So there are a couple of good trail companies out there, but Arrowhead I've used in the past. And then we have there's other projects we work on. There's another place called Trumbull. I don't have any slides, Part of that is because my computer, my laptop went down just before a board meeting the other day, so I had to send it off. And I thought I had gotten all my stuff off of it, but it turns out there were several. I had to recreate this presentation last night because it didn't make it to my external hard drive for whatever reason. So there were several things like that, but there were other photos that didn't make it. But there's a place called Trumbull, just a little north of Deckers. We've been doing trail work there, and usually when we get college groups that request to help out, we'll take them out there and help. And it's generally a closed area. They use it mostly for educational purposes, because we also went in and we had it's called South Platte Enhancement Board, or SPEB, and they have grants every year too. And we've used that, and we did a lot of interpretive signing in that area. That particular area is a forest restoration fire area. So there's lots of ponderosa pine, and they've done different treatments to show people different aspects of what restoration looks like, forest restoration looks like. So it's pretty cool, but my pictures didn't make it. So with that, if you have any other questions, again, recreation is not our primary focus. The other question that Katie had asked me is if we worked with recreation groups or not. And we have not. Generally, by the time it gets to us, the agency that's requesting our help has worked with the recreation groups and things. So we're just going in and we're either the fiscal agent, or if we're designing and implementing, then that's what we're doing. And we let them work with them. That doesn't mean we never work with other groups. We do on other projects all the time. Just on this recreation aspect, we do. I'm trying to think if there's anything I missed. Annually with Denver Water. So we have the participating agreements with the Forest Service. Annually with Denver Water, we do a purchase order for the amount. And they're usually pretty good about that for some of the work on their properties. Other than that, we are primarily grant funded. I don't know if a lot of you are. So a lot of our work and our costs are built into the grants that we write. And then it's donations for unrestricted funds and stuff that we rely on. But a lot of the trail stuff, or a lot of the recreation stuff, is pretty targeted. I haven't gone after, even though I used to do this for state parks, I used to help communities write the state trails grants, but I haven't gone after a state trail grant yet for any of the trail work we're doing. If it gets big enough, if a project becomes big enough and we require a lot of funding, I may try to do it, take that route. But we haven't done that yet. So questions?
What type of agreements do you have with the Forest Service?
So right now we have a couple of different, with the WIP program, the Watershed Health Improvement, we have a participating agreement. And so usually what happens is the local hydrologist is in charge of that. She'll come up, and those amounts vary, and usually good for a couple of years. So I think we just renewed one. So it's a participating agreement. I do not have a stewardship agreement with them yet. I imagine
My second question. Yeah.
If we get into doing some, the wildfire crisis strategy work that they're all talking about on the Front Range, then we might have to have a stewardship agreement. And I think maybe before my time, we might have had one. It goes back years. I just haven't been able to find it. I just heard rumors of it. And then with the other agreements, they're all pretty specific to just the 11-mile or the Lake George Diversion Dam project. So I can't use that money elsewhere in the watershed. It is very specific for that. Whereas with the WIP agreement on the participating agreement, I can use it throughout the watershed on watershed projects.
Great, thank you. That's super helpful.
So let me see if I can get back up online here. Stop share. How about that? And
John, I know
trying to
you're
use a
not-
new computer.
Right. I know you're not
Go ahead.
responsible for like communicating with the recreators, like about all these improvements that are happening, but it seems like that would be a really important aspect of this, especially when it comes to compliance and influencing behavior. Uh, like, do you have examples of communication strategies that you think really were really helpful in that?
Um, for instance, a lot of it is keeping people informed. So usually again, for where the guys were installing the fire rings in that picture, that's a long corridor, or the Happy Meadows corridor where we did all that work. I did a lot of the work with the landowners in Happy Meadows because I had relations with them already. And a lot of that came from keeping them informed on what was happening upstream with the diversion dam. So, hey, we're getting ready to, you might see muddy water, you might see this, and here's when it's completed, and flows are going to go down to this. When it came in Buffalo Creek and installing the fire rings, the Forest Service had done a lot of that pre-work with the mountain biking clubs there. And a lot of the mountain biking clubs that use that area, I think, help maintain their trails there. So we leave that to them. So again, with recreation not being a primary focus with us, like we haven't joined any of somebody has said, they were working with CPW on one of the recreation groups and stuff. We haven't been involved with that too much because again, it's not a focus for us. So
Nice. Any other questions? That was awesome, John. Thank you so much.
well, hopefully more things will get out there. What you hear, and you might hear this too from the Forest Service, that since COVID, the forests are just taking a beating. You have more and more people out all the time and stuff. And so that's why they start looking at what can we do, one, to control that and keep people from driving across meadows down to the river. But how can we also help people enjoy that while protecting resources at the same time? And a lot of that is, when I worked with state parks, was our focus. I worked at a 12,000 acre mountain park where most of it was backcountry oriented, but the focus of heavy recreation was controlled in a corridor and stuff. So that's where our amenities and our facilities were built, and then they could go out to the backcountry from there.
Yeah, we're still being discovered down here, but we definitely saw an increase in impacted areas during COVID that just parking spaces got bigger. First camping expanded, so we're working with the local land manager offices to begin inventorying that and then deciding, okay, like what are the sacrificial areas and what are areas that we need to start putting up barricades and delineating parking, delineating camping, adding, you know, pit toilets where needed. We're just a cool project I would want to share with you all is we have a lease on some state land trust property near Penitente Canyon, which is BLM.
Yeah.
And we built 5 micro cabins with incinerating toilets, 2 burner stove, solar panels, and the BLM was super supportive because they're seeing these new dispersed sites coming, more white tulips showing up. So they were in favor of having a sustainable way to get rid of human waste that wasn't digging another pit toilet or having a septic tank. We went through a lot of, like you mentioned, CDPHE. We had to go to the state plumbing board, but we're just trying to use that project as kind of an example of, hey, leave no trace. Like there's ways to not be negligent on public lands, especially for new people that are just learning and want to get outside, right? But they just don't have the knowledge of, in the West, you have to be on your own and be self-contained a lot of the time, so.
I think that outreach and education component is really, really important. So you have two people, you have those people after COVID that were coming out who just don't care. They're going to do what they want. And those are the people that actually cause the damage. And then you have the people that, like you said, are, hey, let's go try this. So that takes a little bit of education and outreach to them to help them kind of guide them along. There were some state parks that actually had programs for new campers and stuff. We had the last state park I worked at, and I worked at several of them for my career, was they put in cabins on they were nicer than my house. I mean, they were luxury cabins and stuff. So I saw a different type of clientele that came to those versus those that just came to camp and go hiking and stuff. So, yeah, but you have to be able to reach people somehow. In fact, I'm working on a grant now for wildfire. State Forest Service has a new grant program and outreach. So we're working to try to get some funding for that. Because again, what you see for wildfire concerns is, and we just did a survey for the CWPP we're updating, and you do have people who are like, oh, it's not a concern. But if you look at all the data, it's some of the highest risk around. So we're looking for money so we can reach some of those people and go, listen, here's what you should be doing, or at least consider doing and stuff. And a lot of the work, the mitigation work, can be pretty expensive, but there's ways to offset that too. So